My name is Claire Merritt. I'm 24 years old, and the night I found out my father was cheating on my mother, I was 17, standing in the parking lot of a grocery store I'd ridden my bike to, holding a paper bag with 2 cartons of orange juice and a box of crackers, watching my father kiss a woman who was not my mother against the side of a car I had never seen before. He didn't see me. I stood there for 11 seconds. I counted later because I needed something to hold on to, and that was the only fact I had. Then I got on my bike and rode home and put the orange juice in the refrigerator and said nothing. For 3 weeks, I said nothing. And then I said something. And that's when my father looked me in the eye and told me that if I didn't keep my mouth shut, I would no longer have a family. He said it calmly. The way he said everything, like a man who had never once considered that anyone in his house had the right to push back. He was wrong about that. But it took my mother and me a little time to show him exactly how wrong. Before I tell you what happened, take a moment to like this video if this story is hitting close to home. And subscribe if you want to hear more. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what my mother and I did, you need to understand who my father was. Or rather, who he pretended to be. The Merritt House was a 4-bedroom colonial in Fairfield, Connecticut. Good school district. Mature trees in the front yard. A flagstone path my father had laid himself one summer when I was 9, 1 stone at a time, and which he mentioned to every guest who came through the front door for the following 3 years. He was very proud of that path. My father, Dennis Merritt, was an orthodontist, had been since before I was born. His practice, Merritt Orthodontics, was on the 2nd floor of a medical building on Harbor Road and had been there for 18 years. He had a good reputation, clean office, friendly staff. He sponsored my middle school's Little League team for 4 years running. There was a banner with his name on it along the fence of the field on Greenway Avenue. He was handsome in the way that men who take care of themselves are handsome at 50. Silver at the temples, good posture. He wore collared shirts on weekends and had opinions about wine. He was, on the surface, the kind of father other kids at school would mention when they said things like, "Your dad seems really cool." He was not really cool. I understood that before I understood most things. But for a long time, I couldn't have told you exactly what he was instead. My mother, Susan, had a landscape architecture degree she'd stopped using the year I was born. She'd gone back part-time when I was in middle school, consulting for a local firm 2 days a week. She was good at it, the kind of person who saw spaces and understood intuitively what they needed. Our backyard was evidence of this. She'd designed and planted it herself over the course of 5 years. Climbing roses on the back fence, a kitchen garden along the south wall, a Japanese maple in the center that turned extraordinary colors in October. My father called it her hobby. In front of guests. More than once, my mother would smile and change the subject. I watched her do it so many times that it stopped registering as strange. That's the thing about the slow erosion of someone's dignity inside a marriage. It happens so gradually that the people inside it stop noticing. Everyone adjusts. Everyone accommodates. Everyone finds ways to smooth the surface so the household keeps running. And the running of the household was, in the Merritt family, my mother's responsibility entirely. She drove me to school and picked me up. She scheduled my dentist appointments and my eye exams and my annual physical. She planned every holiday dinner and ordered every birthday cake and remembered every detail of every teacher and coach and friend I had ever mentioned. She kept the house and managed the finances and made dinner 5 nights a week, and packed my father's lunch in a cloth bag every morning without being asked. My father came home at 6:30, ate the dinner that was there, watched television, and went to bed. On weekends, he golfed. That was the household. When I was 12, I asked my mother once if she was happy. We were in the kitchen. She was slicing apples. She stopped for just a moment and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, and then she smiled and said, "Of course, sweetheart," and went back to the apples. I didn't ask again. But I filed the pause away. The way you file things you don't have context for yet. I was 17 in the autumn I'm telling you about. Junior year, good grades, cross-country team. I had a small circle of friends, a part-time job at a bookstore on Saturday mornings, and a life that was, by any external measure, completely ordinary. It was a Wednesday in October when everything changed. My mother had asked me to stop at the grocery store on my way home from practice. She needed orange juice and crackers and a specific kind of tea that only one store in town carried. I had my bike. The store was 12 minutes away. No problem. I got what she needed. I was in the parking lot loading the bag into my backpack when I saw them. My father's car was parked 3 rows over. I recognized it immediately. Black Audi, vanity plate that said Dr. Mayor, because the full name didn't fit, and he thought that was funny when he ordered it. He was standing beside it with a woman. She was younger than my mother. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Dark hair pulled back, a long coat. She was laughing at something he'd said, and he was leaning toward her with his hand on the roof of the car just above her shoulder, close in the way people are close when they've already decided there are no rules. He kissed her. Not a long kiss. Not a dramatic movie kiss. Just a real one. The kind that doesn't perform for anyone because it assumes no one is watching. I stood 11 seconds. Then, I left. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my room and stared at the ceiling and listened to the normal sounds of the house. My father watching television downstairs. My mother in the kitchen. The sound of cabinet doors closing. The familiar rhythm of an evening in the Merritt household. Everything the same. Everything completely different. I want to tell you what those 3 weeks of silence felt like, because I think if you have ever known something that you couldn't yet say, you'll understand. It is its own particular weight. You carry it through every conversation, every dinner, every ordinary moment. You watch the person who doesn't know, looking at the person who did the thing, and you are the only one in the room who understands the geometry of what's happening. It changes how you see everything. The flagstone path, the cloth lunch bag, the dinners that appeared at 6:30 every night of my entire childhood. I went to school. I ran practice. I worked my Saturday shift at the bookstore. I came home and ate dinner and did homework and went to bed. At dinner, I watched my father. He was exactly the same. That was the thing I couldn't get past. Completely, entirely the same. The same way he asked about my day without quite listening to the answer. The same way he talked about his practice, his patients, the conference he was going to in Boston in November. The same easy, certain way he moved through the household, picking up his food and his clean clothes and his laundered shirts without a word, because it had never occurred to him to say one. My mother was exactly the same too. She didn't know. I was certain of that, which meant the only person in that house who understood what it actually was had to be me. For 3 weeks, I turned it over. What to do with it? Whether saying something would help or destroy something that couldn't be rebuilt. Whether staying quiet was a kindness or a cruelty. Whether it was even my place. I was 17. I did not have good answers to these questions. What I had was a Tuesday evening in late October when I came downstairs for a glass of water and found my father alone in the kitchen on his phone. He didn't hear me on the stairs. He was laughing softly at something. His voice was low and easy in a way I had almost never heard it. There was a warmth in it that I couldn't remember hearing directed at my mother. At anyone in our house. I stood at the bottom of the stairs. He said her name. I won't write it here. But he said it the way you say someone's name when it means something. And then he said, I know, me too. He turned and saw me. The warmth went out of his face like a light switching off. How long have you been standing there? He said. Long enough. He set the phone face down on the counter. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I had never seen from him before and have thought about many times since. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. Exactly. It was calculation. The rapid, silent computation of someone assessing a problem and deciding how to handle it. Go to bed, Claire. I looked at him. I was 17. I was tired of carrying something that wasn't mine to carry, and something in me had shifted in that moment on the stairs. Listening to him say her name in our kitchen. I saw her, I said. In the parking lot at Whitman's, 3 weeks ago. I didn't say anything because I was trying to figure out what to do. He was very still. I'm going to tell Mom. And that's when Dennis Merritt showed me who he actually was. He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing. He never raised his voice. He had a way of delivering terrible things at a perfectly even volume that somehow made them worse. He crossed his arms, leaned against the counter, looked at me the way he looked at a bill he was deciding whether to dispute. "You're not going to say anything to your mother." "I'm not?" "No, you're not. Because if you do, you will regret it. This family, everything you have, this house, your school, your life, all of it depends on me keeping this family together. And if you go to your mother with this, I will make sure you have nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing." I stared at him. "I will cut you off completely," he said. "Tuition, your car, everything. You will be on your own, and your mother will fall apart. You know she will. Is that what you want? To destroy this family?" He said it like a business decision, like a termination of services, calm and final. That's not love, I thought. That's not a father. That's a man protecting himself. I didn't say any of that. I went to bed. But I lay in the dark for 2 hours, and I made a decision, and it was not the one he was expecting. I want to stop here for a second, because I know some of you are sitting with something right now. Something you know that you haven't said yet, and I want you to think about this. There is a difference between protecting someone and deceiving them. My father framed his threat as protection. He said if you tell her, she'll fall apart. If you tell her, you'll destroy this family. What he meant was, if you tell her, I'll be held accountable. Those are not the same thing. If this is resonating with you, type "I know the difference" in the comments. And if you want to know what happened next, make sure you're subscribed, because the part I'm about to tell you is the part that changed everything. I told my mother on a Thursday. Not immediately. I needed 4 days. Not because I was afraid of my father's threat. I had thought about it carefully and arrived at a place where it simply didn't move me. He was going to cut me off. Fine. I had 2 jobs by the end of the week if I needed them. I had grades. I had a plan. I was 17 and I had more options than he was counting on. What I needed the 4 days for was something else entirely. I needed to think about how. Not whether. How. Because here is what I understood, perhaps more clearly than he expected his 17-year-old daughter to understand. There are 2 ways to tell a person a thing that will break something. You can tell it in a way that leaves them raw and alone and blindsided, standing in the wreckage without a map. Or you can tell it in a way that also hands them something. Information isn't just a wound. It can be a tool if you give it to the right person at the right time with the right preparation. I had been watching my mother smooth surfaces and absorb small humiliations for as long as I could remember. I had watched her set aside her career and her opinions and her name in someone else's professional success story, and I had watched my father call it her hobby. I had watched her make his lunch every single morning for 18 years without a word of thanks. She deserved more than a shock. She deserved the whole picture. So I used the 4 days. I am not proud of everything I did in those 4 days, and I am also not ashamed of it. I was 17 and I was angry, and I was doing the best I could with what I had. My father's home office was on the 2nd floor. He kept it locked when he wasn't in it, but I had known since I was 12 where he kept the spare key. Top drawer of the hall table, under a layer of takeout menus. I knew his computer password because I had watched him type it 100 times without meaning to. He used the same password for everything. The practice management software, his personal laptop, his email. I knew this because when I was 14 and forgot my own email password, he had looked over my shoulder, typed something quickly to help me, and I had seen his hands and remembered. I don't know why I remembered. Some part of my brain had cataloged it. People who are hiding things often underestimate the people they live with. I went into his email. I am not going to tell you everything I found because not all of it is mine to say, but here is what I will tell you. The affair had been going on for 14 months. There were restaurant receipts, hotel reservations, a weekend trip to Newport that I remembered as a dental conference. There were messages. Some of them were simply romantic. Some of them were financial. He had opened a credit card she didn't know about. He had transferred money from a joint savings account into a personal account 3 months ago. $2,000. The kind of transfer that looks like a rounding error if no one is watching closely. My mother was watching the finances. She always had. But she trusted him. She had not been watching for this. I printed what I needed. Not everything. Enough. I organized it in a folder I kept in my backpack. On Thursday evening, I waited until my father left for what he said was a dinner with a colleague. I watched his car back out of the driveway. I gave it 2 minutes. Then I went to find my mother. She was in the backyard garden, even though it was almost dark. She did that sometimes. Went out after dinner to check on things, to pull a dead stem or adjust a tie on the climbing roses. I could see her from the back door, a flashlight in one hand, crouching beside the kitchen garden. Mom. She stood and turned. Something in my voice, I think, because her expression changed immediately. Not alarm, something more careful than alarm. Come inside, I said. I need to show you something. We sat at the kitchen table, same table we'd eaten 1,000 dinners at, same chairs. The overhead light was on and the window over the sink was dark with the night outside. I put the folder in front of her. She opened it slowly. She read without speaking. I watched her face. Here is what I will tell you about watching someone discover a betrayal in real time. It is not loud. It is not dramatic, at least not at first. It is a very quiet thing, a series of small compressions, a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the hands. The face working through something the body understands before the mind has caught up. She went through every page. She did not rush. She read carefully, the way she read everything, with full attention. When she closed the folder, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. She nodded, not with disappointment, with understanding. He threatened you. It wasn't a question. Yes. What did he say? I told her, word for word, as close as I could get. The calm voice, the calculation behind the eyes. Nothing. You will have nothing. Is that what you want? To destroy this family? My mother sat with that for a moment. Then she said something I was not expecting. He's made a mistake, she said. I looked at her. Her voice was different now. Not broken, not shaking. There was something underneath it that I recognized but had never quite heard from her before. Something that had been there a long time, waiting for a reason to surface. Not the affair, she said. That too. But I mean threatening you. That was his mistake. I didn't understand yet. I would. She stood up from the table. She went to the kitchen cabinet above the refrigerator, where she kept papers and documents and things she didn't need often. She stood on her toes and reached to the back and pulled down a white envelope. She set it on the table in front of me. I've known about the credit card for 6 weeks, she said. I found the statement in the mail. I was waiting. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I was waiting. She sat back down. Now I know what I was waiting for, she said. I was waiting for you. What my mother did next took 8 weeks. I want to walk you through it because it is important to understand that what we did was not impulsive. It was not hot. It was careful and thorough, and it was done with the full weight of everything my mother had spent 18 years learning about our household and our finances, and the particular way my father operated. The first call she made was on a Friday morning while my father was at his practice. She called a family law attorney named Patricia Voss, who had an office in Westport. My mother had found her 3 years earlier during a conversation with a friend whose marriage had ended. She had written the name down in the back of a notebook and never mentioned it to anyone. She had written it down, she told me later, just in case. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notepad, and she made the call. I won't tell you everything that came out of that call because some of it is my mother's and not mine to share, but I will tell you what it meant in practical terms. Patricia Voss had seen the kind of financial arrangements my father had created before. The personal account, the credit card, the transferred savings. She knew what they were called in a courtroom, and she knew how to document them properly. My mother gave her the folder, everything I had printed, plus the credit card statement she had already found. Patricia Voss said, "This is a good start." My mother said, "I want to be thorough." Patricia said, Then let's be thorough. The second thing my mother did was call her college roommate, a woman named Beth, who had spent 20 years in landscape architecture and run her own firm in Boston for the last 8. They had stayed in touch in the loose, annual way of old friends. My mother called her on a Saturday morning and they talked for 2 hours. I do not know everything that was said in that call, but I know that by the end of it, my mother had a standing offer of a senior consulting position at Beth's firm. Part-time to start, full-time if she wanted it. The kind of offer that doesn't appear without 2 decades of quiet competence establishing itself. My father had called her work a hobby for years. Beth did not call it a hobby. The third thing my mother did was go through every financial document in the house: tax returns, bank statements, retirement accounts, investment portfolios, the mortgage. She had always managed the day-to-day finances, which meant she knew exactly where to look and what she was looking at. She built a complete picture of what the household was worth and what her share of it was, and what the transferred savings and the credit card debt meant for that picture. She worked at the kitchen table in the evenings after dinner, her reading glasses on, documents spread around her, while my father watched television one room over. He had no idea. I helped when I could. Mostly, I stayed out of the way and watched my mother become someone I had always known was in there. The fourth thing, and this is the part that I think about most, was something she did on her own. I found out about it later. She went back to that grocery store parking lot. She said she needed to see it, the place where it had been real to someone else before it was real to her. She drove there on a Sunday morning and sat in her car in the same row I had stood in and looked at the ordinary asphalt and the ordinary cars and the ordinary afternoon light, and she cried. Hard, she told me. For about 10 minutes. And then she dried her face, put the car in reverse, and drove home. She made dinner that night. She set the table. She packed his lunch the next morning. She said nothing. 8 weeks, start to finish. 8 weeks of complete, deliberate, invisible preparation. My father never saw it coming. He was too busy being certain he was safe. I want to stop here and ask you something honestly. Have you ever watched someone in your life finally decide they'd had enough? Not in a loud, dramatic way, in the quiet way, the way where they just stop. Stop absorbing. Stop accommodating. Stop smoothing the surface. And instead, they start building. It's one of the most extraordinary things I have ever witnessed. And I had the privilege of watching it happen in my own kitchen. Type, she stopped smoothing in the comments if you know exactly what I mean. And stay with me, because this is where the plan comes together. My father came home on a Wednesday evening in December to find Patricia Voss sitting in the living room. He stood in the front doorway with his coat still on and his briefcase still in his hand, and looked at the woman he had never seen before sitting in a chair in his living room. My mother was on the couch, calm, hands in her lap. She had made tea, and there were 2 cups on the coffee table, one for her and one for Patricia. She had not made one for my father. Dennis, she said, this is my attorney. I think you should sit down. He didn't sit, not for a moment. He stood in the doorway, and I watched his face do what it had done in the kitchen that night in October. The same calculation, rapid and silent, running the numbers. Then he looked at me. I was sitting on the stairs, not hiding, just there. His jaw tightened. He sat. Patricia did most of the talking from that point. She spoke in the particular language of family law, which is precise and deliberate and carries the weight of consequence in every sentence. She referenced the account he had opened, the credit card, the transferred savings. She used the word dissipation, which is the legal term for marital assets used to fund an affair, and she said it with the flat professionalism of someone who had said it many times before. My father tried 3 things in sequence. First, he tried denial. He said there had been a misunderstanding. Patricia placed a printed bank statement on the coffee table in front of him. Then he tried minimization. He said it wasn't what it looked like. Patricia placed the credit card statement beside it. Then he tried me. He turned in his chair and looked directly at me on the stairs. His voice dropped. I saw what he was trying to do. He was trying to find the version of this conversation where I was still the variable he could control. Claire, he said, we talked about this. We did, I said. And I made my decision. He turned back to the room. His face had changed. The calculation was still there, but the confidence underneath it was gone, and without the confidence, it looked like something else. Something smaller. He looked, for the first time in my life, like someone who understood that the people he had underestimated had not, in fact, been as manageable as he assumed. My mother lifted her tea. She took a sip. She set it back on the saucer. She did not look at him when she spoke. "I want you out of the house by the end of the month," she said. "The papers will be filed tomorrow. Patricia has the documentation. I think you know there's enough here to make a long fight very difficult for you." A long fight, Patricia added pleasantly, would also be expensive. And public, which given the nature of your practice, would be worth considering. My father sat very still for a long time. Then he said, "And what does she get?" He meant me. He said she, about me, in my presence, the way you refer to an object or a minor inconvenience. My mother finally looked at him. "She gets everything she's entitled to," she said, "and you don't get to be part of deciding what that is." He left the room. He went upstairs. We could hear him. My mother and Patricia sat in the living room and finished their tea and spoke quietly about next steps, and I sat on the stairs and listened to my father moving around in the room above us, the room where he had kept all of his certainty, and I thought about 11 seconds in a parking lot, and 3 weeks of silence, and 4 days of preparation, and 8 weeks of my mother becoming the person she had always been. He was out of the house in 3 weeks, not by the end of the month. 3 weeks. The divorce took 7 months. I won't walk you through every detail because most of it was procedural, and some of it is my mother's to keep. What I will tell you is that Patricia Voss was very good at her job, and that the documentation was thorough, and that my father's long fight turned out to be considerably shorter than he had anticipated. My mother kept the house. She kept the financial accounts that were marital property. She kept the Japanese maple in the center of the backyard that turned colors in October, and the climbing roses on the back fence and the kitchen garden along the south wall. She started the position with Beth's firm in January, part-time, then full-time by spring. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. It turned out that 20 years of being called a hobby had not actually diminished what she knew. My father paid what he was required to pay, on time, every month. Patricia had been very clear about the consequences of not doing so. He remarried 2 years later. I heard about it through a mutual family friend. I have not been to his home since the December evening he walked out of ours. We speak occasionally, briefly, on the kinds of occasions that require it. I am civil because I was raised by a woman who understood the difference between cold and composed, and I choose composed. He never actually cut me off. The threat had been what it always was, a tool, a bluff, the thing a man reaches for when he has run out of anything real to say. He paid my tuition. He was required to, by the divorce agreement. Patricia had included it specifically. I thought about that sometimes. That he had threatened me with financial abandonment as leverage and had ended up paying my college tuition by court order. That the thing he had used as a weapon had come back to him in the form of a legal obligation. I didn't find it funny exactly, but I found it accurate. I graduated 4 years later. My mother sat in the front section with Petra's family, who had adopted us both in the way that certain families do. She wore a blue dress she had bought with her first paycheck from Beth's firm. She cried when they called my name, not quietly, the full kind. I walked across the stage and thought about the kitchen table. Both versions of it. The one where my father had run his calculation and decided I was a manageable variable. And the one where my mother had spread documents around her reading glasses and built something careful and complete. I thought about the Japanese maple, which was probably turning in the backyard that October morning while I walked across a stage in a borrowed gown. I thought about 11 seconds. That's all it takes sometimes. 11 seconds of standing still and seeing clearly what is actually in front of you. And then everything that comes after that, every decision and call and folder and cup of tea served to one person and not another, comes from those 11 seconds. I was glad I had stood there. I was glad I had counted. My mother is 53 now. She runs the New England operations of Beth's firm. She has an office with a window and a desk with her name on a plate outside the door. She travels occasionally for projects. She has a group of friends she has dinner with on the first Thursday of every month at a restaurant in Westport. She redecorated the living room last spring. She took out the furniture my father had chosen and replaced it with things she actually liked. The kitchen table is the same. She kept it. I asked her once why, given everything that had happened on it. She thought about it for a moment. Because good things happened there too, she said. The two aren't separate. I thought that was one of the wiser things I had ever heard. She is happy, not in a performance of happiness. In the real, quiet, unremarkable way of someone who has arranged their life around what actually matters to them and has enough of it. I visit on Sundays when I can. She makes dinner. We sit at the same table. The window above the sink shows the backyard, and in October, if the timing is right, you can see the Japanese maple at its peak. All that color against the dark fence. The rose is done for the season, but the bones of the garden still there, still shaped, still hers. My father and I are what we are. I don't have great warmth for him. I don't have great hatred either. What I have is clarity. He showed me who he was on two separate occasions. In the parking lot, when he thought no one was watching, and in the kitchen, when he found out someone had been. Both times he was completely himself. I have found that useful. There's something to be said for knowing exactly who someone is, even when the knowing is painful. Maybe especially then. I want to say something to you before I go. If you are 17 and you are holding something heavy, something you saw that you weren't supposed to see, something you know that no one else in your house knows yet, I want you to hear this. The weight of a secret you're keeping to protect someone is not yours to carry alone. I know that's easier to say than to act on. I know the fear of what happens when you put it down. I know the particular terror of my father's voice in that kitchen, calm and certain and threatening the foundation of everything I stood on. But here's what that night taught me. The foundation he was threatening was already compromised. He had been compromising it for 14 months. The choice was not between a solid house and a broken one. The choice was between knowing the house was broken and not knowing, between my mother having the information she needed to make real choices and my mother not having it. Giving her that information was not destruction. It was the beginning of something. It took time and it was hard, and there were nights I know she cried in ways I didn't see. But she got to choose. She got to act. She got to become the person who had been waiting in that garden all along. That mattered. It still does. And the threat, the "you will have nothing," the "I will cut you off completely." I want to say something about that too. A parent who uses your security as leverage to protect their own secret is not actually offering you security. They are offering you a transaction. Stay quiet, receive stability, speak, lose everything. That is not love. That is not a family. That is a man telling you that your silence is worth more to him than your well-being. I refused the transaction. And I have never once been sorry. From a psychological perspective, what my father did in that kitchen that night has a name. It's called coercive control. The use of threats, financial leverage, or the fear of consequences to silence someone who has information you don't want disclosed. It often looks, from the outside, like discipline or rationality. It is neither. It is the behavior of someone who has prioritized self-preservation over the people they are supposed to protect. What my mother did in the weeks that followed has a name too, though it's harder to find in textbooks. It's the particular courage of a person who has spent years accommodating someone else's comfort, deciding, one quiet evening at a kitchen table, that she is done, not with a scene, not with an explosion. With a folder and an attorney and 2 cups of tea, there is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, that builds in private. That doesn't ask permission or make speeches or wait for the right moment because it understands that the right moment is the one where you're ready. My mother was ready. She had been ready, I think, for longer than either of us knew. I was 17 when I stood in a parking lot for 11 seconds. I'm 24 now and I have thought about those 11 seconds more times than I can count. Not with regret, not with anger, exactly. With something more like gratitude, for the clarity of them. For the way they set something in motion that ended with my mother in a blue dress in a front row, crying the full kind of tears for her daughter walking across a stage. For the Japanese maples still standing in the backyard, still turning every October, still hers. Some things take 11 seconds to see, and a lifetime to understand. This is my story. I want to hear yours. Have you ever been threatened into silence by someone who was supposed to protect you? Have you ever watched someone close to you find the version of themselves they'd been sitting on for years? Tell me in the comments. Type, "I held the secret," or "I told the truth." I want to know which side of it you've been on. If this story reached you, please subscribe. I share stories like this every week, and if someone in your life needs to hear this one, send it to them. Thank you for staying until the end.